Hi, I'm Alan Ross. I'm the managing editor of APC Media. This is DISTRIBUTECH International 2024 Interviews with Thought Leaders. Enjoy. My next guest is Andrew Hodgson.
Hi.
Andrew is with Camlin Energy, and I got to know you just a little moment ago when we were over doing a showcase. Tell me a little bit about your career in the power industry.
Yeah, so I guess it was probably a bit of a non-traditional start. So I actually did physiology as a degree.
Yeah.
And then I got into a graduate trainee program with Northern Power Grid, so a UK distribution operator.
Right.
And that was great because I spent 6 months in 4 different areas. So 2 years, saw some operations, customer service, lots of things like that. And then I settled in the IT side of things. So I spent maybe 20 years working across utilities, really.
Yeah.
So distribution, water, some metering as well. And ended up at Camlin in 2021.
You know, I think that's interesting because the arc of your career by being in IT and where you are now, you're in the right place.
Absolutely, the right place at the right time.
So let's talk about that. The industry up until now, there's been a lot of change. I mean, there's just so much going on. From your perspective, back, let's just say 10 years ago, everything was pretty static. You know, you had generation, transmission, distribution. Then all of a sudden, green started. And everything changed, and it has been changing since. Talk a little bit about that time up until now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've seen since I joined, a massive change. So working on the supply side and then coming into the sort of distribution network side of the business, a big change. I always saw the networks businesses almost as being very closed, very sort of insular.
Yes.
And that's one of the biggest changes I think that I've seen. This move to like system-wide thinking, and actually having to interact with lots of other people. So having to interact with, water companies, supply businesses, local communities, renewable businesses. To me, that's probably one of the biggest changes that I've seen. And I guess the data side of things as well. So this move was non-traditional skill sets, I guess you would call them, that, rather than being very heavily engineering focused, I think now of these businesses as data businesses. Really, huge amounts of data coming into them that they're having to process and make sense of. But the system thinking, I suppose, is probably the biggest change that I think I've seen. Really.
Collaboration, system thinking.
Absolutely.
You mentioned something, when utilities, and many, as you say, it's departments in utilities, very insular, very closed, and getting that to open, it's a cultural change.
Absolutely.
It has been hard for many of the graybeards like me. You're not a graybeard, you're a generation before the graybeards. But the graybeards really struggled with that. Cybersecurity, the IT people always used to say, you can't do that. You ask a question, can I go to the bathroom? You can't do that, because they just wanted to lock everything down. You can't do that anymore.
No.
Lock it down.
No.
Yeah.
And I think even that's changed it even more now when you start to bring in things like AI and machine learning, particularly for engineers. That's a big change in mindset for them. Have a computer tell them what to do. But, I think the industry is adjusting to it really well.
Okay, let me get to that, because you brought us up to here. The minute you said AI and machine learning, now you're moving from here to where we're going.
Sure.
And Camlin's got some things going on. We'll talk about that in a bit. But that's the biggest change now, and it's bigger than what we've seen in the last decade. This is just happening so rapidly.
Yeah.
You mentioned how some engineers struggled with things like that, because I'm an engineer. We love to solve problems, and we like the static part of the problem.
Yeah.
When you introduce other things into the problem, we go, wait a minute, that wasn't part of the deal, especially mechanical engineering. Talk a little bit about where we are now as an industry and what you see going ahead.
So I think the skills challenge in terms of going forward is one thing that kind of I see as a big challenge. Not only from an engineering point of view, obviously, you mentioned the aging workforce and people kind of disappearing from the profession, but also completely new skill sets that are going to be needed.
Yes.
I think I read something recently that in Europe, they're expecting 40% of the jobs in the next 10 years in the power industry to be non-traditional skills. Digital, IT, not your traditional engineers. So that, to me, that is a massive problem. And we need to be able to recruit those. Those are high demand kind of professions that, finance are looking for them, all these different industries. Yeah. How do we attract them into the power sector?
There's a major utility in the United States that maybe 3 years ago, this data was up, they hired more data scientists than they did electrical engineers.
Crazy. Who would have thought?
Who would have thought of that, right? I mean,
yeah.
You're exactly right. Everything's changing. Data science is becoming one of the biggest areas that people need.
Absolutely. I think the other thing going forward is, as well, to me, there's far more public recognition of what the power industry is doing. 10 years ago, you turned your lights on, you expected them to come on.
Yes.
But, so that influences things like policy, political things, strategy as well. That if there's a power cut overnight and you get up in the morning and you suddenly can't drive to work because your car's not charged, that's an issue. So I think that is probably changing where we go in the next 5 to 10 years, just because there's much more awareness and scrutiny, I guess.
The ratepayer, as that's how utilities look at, turned to a consumer, and now they're having it as a prosumer. They buy, they sell, they're part of it, and prosumers are now becoming much more educated about what's happening.
Yeah.
Many of them being taken advantage of, with people who say, let me put this in for you, and then suddenly it is the inverters go, and you got to, hey, can I get a warranty on the inverter? Well, we don't give you one. Photovoltaic cell won't go as fast as the inverters will go. That brings up another problem. An inverter-based system creates a lot of harmonics and transients that weren't in the system before. Can you talk a little bit about that? What does that mean to a utility, to an industrial plant, to a hospital?
Yeah, so I guess this comes right back to the data again. So you've got to have the visibility of it. You've got to be able to measure these things, and then you've got to be able to, I guess, predict as well what's going to happen depending on those different type of loads, different type of things connected to the network. So that's where the data science kind of comes in, that actually allows the utilities to deal with those problems, as they occur. So,
okay. Last but not least, we did a showcase with you at Camlin. That's a different thing. This one, tell me a little bit about Camlin today, what's happening. There's some amazing things that are going on. You actually did a demo for me of something. Talk about that.
I did. So, Camlin's been supporting the utilities for over 30 years now, but predominantly on the hardware and the monitoring side. Because of all the changes we've talked about, we're now developing our software, our data, our services offering. So here, we're talking specifically about a Sapient product. So it's a suite of software solutions which helps utilities deal with the data. Right. It helps them generate the insights. It helps them turn them into, we call them prescriptive actions, so specific maintenance activities that engineers have to carry out. So it's all about really, I guess, maximizing the value from all the monitoring equipment that they have there and all this data that's been generated. And
it's not just data from your monitors, it's data from other sources.
Absolutely,
as well.
It's data from other sources, it's offline data, third-party data as well. So weather data, for example, is something that we would take in and consider. So not just tied to Camlin devices.
The other thing I think, so there's Camlin, what I always thought of as the monitor.
Sure.
Now you've got Sapient, which takes the monitor and the data to another level.
Yeah.
The other thing that you've got is you've got human beings who I believe subject matter experts that I've worked with there, the people like Nathan, the people like Marco Cozy. They're there when that data might be, we're not sure exactly what to do.
Yeah.
And you got to talk a little bit about that, subject matter experts.
Yeah, so one thing that we see with particularly AI, machine learning, data things, one thing that's really important to us is this idea of human in the loop.
Yep.
So you've got to have an expert in the loop.
Human in the loop. Okay.
So somebody that, can understand it, knows the data. So firstly, if the data's telling you something that's completely wrong, they can spot that. But also help improve some of the predictions that we're making. So all of the algorithms that we have are all based on, exactly as you say, people like Marco, people like Nathan, the experts that know how assets work, know how assets fail. And that's fundamentally built into the products, the software products that we have now.
Excellent. Well thought out plan, well thought out strategy. Welcome to Atlanta.
Thank you.
And thank you for doing this.